At the age of 83, I've lived through so many moments, from peaceful afternoons to busy days caring for my grandchildren. I've had my share of joy, but I also know what it means to experience loss. After my wife passed away, the loneliness felt unbearable. I thought moving into a nursing home might help ease that void. I believed it would be a safe, comfortable place where I would have the care I needed, and more importantly, someone to talk to. I trusted my family when they suggested it, thinking it would be the easiest way forward. They reassured me that everything would be fine, but the reality turned out to be far different than what I had imagined. Instead of finding comfort, I found myself trapped in a life that I no longer recognized. At first, I thought I would adjust quickly, but as time went on, I began to feel more isolated and disconnected from the life I had once known. There were moments when I longed for the little things, like making a cup of tea in my own kitchen or simply sitting on my favorite chair, reading a book in peace. I believed the nursing home would be a place where I could get help with what I could no longer do, but it soon became clear that I had given up more than I ever realized. I know that many of you, whether for yourself or a loved one, are likely considering the idea of moving into a nursing home. You might think it's the safest option, the simplest path forward, but before you make that decision, I want to share with you some of the signs I learned during my time here. These signs aren't just about the challenges you'll face, they're about how your life will change in ways you may not expect. I hope that by sharing my experience, I can help you think twice before making this life-changing decision. So let me walk you through the 6 signs I wish I had known before I made the move. Here is signs 1, loss of independence. One of the first signs that I had truly lost my independence came not with a sudden change, but with the small, everyday things that no longer belonged to me. Before I moved into the nursing home, I had the freedom to do what I wanted when I wanted. I could decide when to wake up, when to take a walk, or when to enjoy a quiet moment with a cup of tea. These were the small pleasures that made up my day, and they were mine to control. But once I entered the nursing home, everything changed. The schedule here was rigid. Meals were served at specific times, whether or not I was hungry. I didn't get to choose when I wanted to sleep or wake up. If I wanted to take a walk or sit outside, I had to wait for staff assistance. It wasn't just about the big things either. I couldn't even decide what time I wanted to read my book or when to listen to music. Every moment was accounted for by someone else's plans. It didn't take long before I realized that the small freedoms I once had, choosing when to eat, sleep, or relax, were now gone. I remember my first morning here. I woke up early, as I always did at home, and was ready to start my day. But when I looked around the room, I realized that everything had changed. The cozy corner where I would sit with my book was no longer there. The kitchen, where I used to brew my morning tea, wasn't mine anymore. It was a stark reminder that this wasn't my home, and I was no longer in charge of my life. Simple things that I had taken for granted were now privileges that I had to ask for. As I settled in, I noticed that even the smallest decisions I had once made, without a second thought, were now being made for me. What to wear, when to take a shower, when to rest, everything was scheduled. There was no more spontaneity, no more freedom to make those small choices that had once defined my day. The hardest part was realizing that once I gave up these freedoms, they weren't easy to get back. You adapt, you have to. You start to follow the system, but in the process, you lose a part of yourself. You stop making decisions for yourself, and eventually you begin to feel like you're just another name on a list. If you're considering moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, can you accept losing the small freedoms that make your life yours? Because once they're gone, you might find yourself missing them more than you ever thought possible. Signs 2, feeling forgotten. Another sign I quickly realized after moving into the nursing home was the feeling of being forgotten. It's not that my family didn't care or love me, but the simple truth is that the world outside keeps moving, and eventually it becomes easier for people to forget about you. When I first arrived, my family reassured me that they would visit often. They promised me they would be there, just like they always had been. And for the first few weeks, they did visit. My daughter came by once a week, my grandchildren came on weekends, and for a short while, it felt like life was still the same. But as the months passed, things started to change. The visits became less frequent. My daughter called instead of coming in person, and the grandkids, busy with school and work, no longer had time to visit. Holidays came and went, and although promises were made, plans would often fall through. On special days, like my birthday, they would say they would come, but the visits never materialized. Instead, I received a card or a gift with a note that said they were thinking of me. I can't explain the feeling of sitting alone in my room on these occasions, wondering if they had truly forgotten me or if life had simply taken over. It wasn't just my family. As time went on, I started losing touch with the world outside the nursing home. The neighbors I had known for years, the local shopkeepers, and even the people I used to see on my daily walks, they were all gone. My friends who used to meet me for coffee or a chat no longer came by. I felt isolated, disconnected from everything I had once known. It's not easy to admit, but the loneliness began to seep in. There were days when I sat in the common room, staring at the door, hoping someone would come. But no one did. The hardest part was not wanting to burden my family. I didn't want to call them too often, as I didn't want to seem like I was complaining or being needy. I remember one night, holding my phone, debating whether to call my son. I knew he was busy, and I didn't want to bother him. I put the phone down, but the feeling of being forgotten stayed with me. It's a hard truth to accept, but the longer you stay in a nursing home, the easier it is for people to assume you're fine, that you don't need them as much as you once did. If you're considering moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that as time goes on, you might feel forgotten? Because no matter how much your family loves you, once you're not physically there, it becomes easier for them to forget, even if that's never their intention. Signs 3. Loss of purpose. As time passed, I began to notice another sign that I hadn't anticipated, the loss of purpose. Before moving into the nursing home, my life was filled with responsibilities, no matter how small. I had routines, things I did every day that gave my life meaning. I would water my plants, make my morning coffee, clean the house, or spend time with my grandchildren. These activities, simple as they were, gave me a sense of purpose and helped me feel connected to the world. I woke up each day with something to do, a reason to get out of bed and keep moving. But in the nursing home, those routines disappeared. Meals were prepared for me, cleaning was done by someone else, and my little responsibilities, the ones that had made my life feel full, were no longer there. At first, I thought it would be nice to have a break from chores, to relax and enjoy the time I had. But as the weeks went by, I realized that it wasn't just about relaxing. It was about losing the things that kept me engaged and motivated. I no longer had any tasks to care for, and soon I found myself with nothing to do but wait for the next meal or the next activity. The days began to stretch on endlessly, one after another, with no real purpose. I saw it in the other residents too. People who had once been active and full of energy were now sitting in common areas, staring out the windows or sleeping the day away. George, a former carpenter who had spent his life building things, was one of them. He used to love creating small projects in his garage, but here, there were no tools, no projects to start. He once told me, "I feel useless," and I understood exactly what he meant. When you have nothing to do, nothing to care for, it's easy to start feeling like you've lost your reason for being. At first, I tried to fill the time with activities. I participated in group exercises, crafts, and games, but none of them held the same meaning for me. It wasn't the same as working on a project I was passionate about or caring for something I truly loved. It was just a way to pass the time, nothing more. That's when I realized that losing purpose isn't just about having something to do. It's about having something that makes you feel alive, something that keeps you connected to who you are. If you are considering a nursing home, ask yourself, what gives your life meaning? Because once you lose that sense of purpose, it can be harder to hold on to the things that keep you feeling like yourself. Signs 4. Declining health. Another unexpected sign I experienced after moving into the nursing home was the rapid decline in my health. Before I arrived, I was still managing to take care of myself. I wasn't running marathons, but I could walk around the neighborhood, take care of small tasks around the house, and cook my own meals. I had my little routines that kept me moving. I did my best to stay active, even if it was just walking to the grocery store or stretching in the mornings. I wasn't in perfect shape, but I was still independent. But once I moved into the nursing home, everything changed. At first, I thought it would be nice to take it easy, to have meals brought to me and not worry about cooking. I thought I could relax and take a break from the responsibilities that had weighed on me for so long. But what I didn't realize was that this shift in lifestyle, from being active and involved in my own care to relying on others, would cause my health to deteriorate faster than I ever imagined. I stopped moving as much. I no longer had to walk around the house to get things done or even take a trip to the store. Meals were served to me, and I didn't have to prepare anything. At first, it seemed like a luxury, but before long, I noticed my muscles growing weaker. Getting up from a chair became harder, and simple tasks, like bending over to tie my shoes, became challenging. It wasn't just me. I saw the same thing happen to other residents. People who had been active before, like Alice, a woman I met here who had once walked every day, were now using walkers and, in some cases, wheelchairs. I saw her go from walking on her own to needing help to get from one room to the next. One of the most difficult realizations for me was how quickly it happened. My body had become accustomed to the limited movement, and soon it was harder to keep my muscles strong. I could no longer climb stairs without feeling winded. I remember a time when I used to pride myself on how easily I could do things like carrying groceries or taking walks around the block. But now those tasks felt like distant memories. The less I did, the weaker I became. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, will you still have the motivation to stay active when everything is designed to make life easier? Because once you stop moving, it's not as easy as you might think to get back up. Signs 5. Loss of privacy and dignity. Another sign I began to notice after moving into the nursing home was the loss of privacy and dignity. At home, I was used to having my own space, where I could do whatever I pleased without anyone interfering. I had my bedroom, where I could close the door and enjoy some peace and quiet when I needed it. I could choose to be alone, or if I wanted company, I could invite friends or family over. I never had to worry about someone coming in without permission or needing assistance with things that felt too personal. But in the nursing home, privacy became a distant memory. It started the moment I moved in. Staff members came in and out of my room regularly to check on me, help me with meals, or assist with anything else I needed. While I appreciated their care, it felt strange to be constantly observed. There were no moments where I could simply be alone, without someone entering my room, whether for a scheduled visit or an unexpected checkup. It wasn't just about staff entering without notice. It was the feeling of always being watched, always being attended to in a way that made me feel less like an individual and more like a patient on a list of things to do. Even simple things like using the bathroom or getting dressed became an ordeal. Sometimes I had to wait for assistance, or when someone would help, I felt like I had no control over my own body. I'm used to being independent, doing things for myself, but here I had to ask for help in ways I never thought I would. It was one of the hardest things to accept, the loss of dignity. Having to rely on someone for such personal tasks made me feel vulnerable and exposed. Even when the staff was kind, it was hard not to feel a sense of shame or helplessness, especially when I had spent my whole life being self-sufficient. And then there was the issue of sharing a room with a roommate. I didn't choose the person I shared my space with, and there were moments when it was uncomfortable. My roommate might have different habits, needs, or even medical issues that affected the shared space. Sometimes it felt like I was losing control over even the most basic aspects of my life, like where I slept or how I arranged my belongings. My room was no longer a sanctuary. It became a place where I had little say in how it was organized or used. If you are considering moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control over your own life that you've always had? Because once it's gone, it's not as easy to regain as you might think. Sign 6. Realizing it's harder to leave than you think. The final sign that I want to share, one that took me by surprise, is realizing that it's harder to leave a nursing home than you might think. When I first moved in, I thought it would be temporary. I told myself that I would try it out, see how it went, and if I didn't like it, I could always go back home. I imagined that if I didn't feel comfortable, I could simply pack my things and leave. But the reality turned out to be far more complicated. The first obstacle I encountered was my home. It no longer felt like the place I had left behind. After months of living in the nursing home, I had grown accustomed to a different routine. My house sat empty, and maintaining it from a distance became more and more difficult. My children had already made changes to the house, selling items they thought I wouldn't need anymore, and even considering renting it out. When I expressed the desire to return home, they hesitated. They asked me if I was sure I could manage on my own, suggesting that staying in the nursing home would be safer. Their concern, though coming from a place of love, made me realize how much harder it would be to leave. Then there was the issue of my health. After months of living in a place where everything was done for me, I had lost much of my strength. I wasn't physically capable of taking care of myself the way I used to. I could barely walk without feeling exhausted, and simple tasks like cooking or cleaning were no longer possible. My independence had slowly faded, and the fear of trying to live on my own again was overwhelming. I felt unsure of whether I could handle the demands of life outside the nursing home. What I thought would be a simple decision, to go home, became a daunting challenge that I wasn't prepared for. It's not just the physical challenges that make leaving difficult, there's also an emotional aspect. After living in the nursing home for a while, it starts to feel like your new reality. The outside world, the life I once knew, felt distant and almost unreachable. The longer I stayed, the harder it became to imagine going back to the life I had before. It felt like a dream that I couldn't quite touch anymore. The comfort of knowing that help was available at any moment made it harder to think about managing on my own. It was a slow realization. Leaving the nursing home wasn't as easy as I had thought it would be. If you are considering moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that once you settle in, leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you become accustomed to the routine, the comfort, and the assistance, it's easy to forget how much you'll need to fight to regain your independence. Looking back, I don't regret getting older, but I do regret believing that a nursing home was my only option. I walked in thinking it would provide comfort, safety, and a better quality of life. But what I found instead was a place that slowly took away my independence, my privacy, my sense of purpose, and even my dignity. The loss of these small but significant parts of life made me realize just how important they were to my overall well-being. If I could do it all over again, I would have fought harder to stay in my own home. I would have looked for alternatives to nursing home care, whether it was hiring a caregiver or exploring other support options that allowed me to maintain my freedom. I would have made sure I truly needed to be there before making such a permanent move. The life I had with its simple routines, my choices, and my independence was worth holding on to for as long as possible. If you're facing this decision, I encourage you to think long and hard about what you will lose by moving into a nursing home. Is it the right choice for you? Can you live with giving up your privacy, your freedom, and the things that make you feel truly alive? There's no easy answer, but it's a question worth asking before you take that step. I hope that by sharing my story, you'll take the time to consider all the possibilities and not just settle for what seems like the easiest option. The life you're living today, with its routines, independence, and small joys, is worth preserving for as long as you can. You deserve to keep the things that make life yours. If you found this story valuable, I urge you to share it with others who may be facing this tough decision. Spread the word, have the conversation with your loved ones, and think carefully about what is truly best for you or those you care about. Take action now to ensure that you or your loved ones maintain the freedom and dignity we all deserve. Don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences. I'd love to hear from you. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon so you won't miss any future content. Your support helps us keep creating meaningful content to inform and inspire you. Thank you for watching.